It was a quiet Tuesday evening, the kind where the city of Toledo, Ohio, seemed to settle into a slow pace as the hours ticked by. The clock read 8:42 p.m. when Officer Reuben Colby received the call. A vehicle parked in the same spot for an extended period of time. It wasn't unusual for him to get these kinds of calls. Most of the time, it was just a driver who had dozed off after a long night or someone waiting for a food delivery. People, especially those in quiet neighborhoods like the one off Lincoln Avenue, loved to report the oddities when they had nothing else to do. But this call? This one felt different. Colby had been a cop long enough, 10 years to be exact, to know that sometimes what seemed like a mundane situation could spiral into something else. So, he responded without hesitation. It was part of the job, after all. You always responded. As he turned into the parking lot, he immediately spotted the vehicle in question, a black Tahoe parked under a broken street lamp near the leasing office. It hadn't moved in hours, and the way it sat there, silent and still, immediately drew his attention. The windows were dark enough to obscure the interior, and there were no signs of activity. No hazard lights flashing, no dome lights flickering on the dashboard, just a question mark, a vehicle suspended in time. He radioed in his location, unbuckled his seatbelt, and opened the door, stepping out into the warm April night. It wasn't a feeling of nervousness that slowed his steps, but a cautious habit. Colby knew better than anyone that you never knew what someone might be hiding, what they could be running from, or what could be tucked away in the glove box. He approached the SUV carefully, noting that the engine was off and there was no movement inside. As he tapped his knuckles on the driver's side window, he felt the weight of the silence around him. No answer. He tapped again, this time more firmly, and then, without a sound, the window slid down smoothly, almost as if it was meant to happen without drawing attention. Colby leaned in slightly, his voice calm and authoritative. "Evening? You all right in there?" The woman inside looked directly into his eyes. There was no hesitation, no panic, just calm, almost too calm. It was a strange stillness that didn't sit right with him. "Good evening, officer. Yes, just taking notes," she replied evenly, her tone measured and controlled. There was something almost too professional about it, as if she had rehearsed this exact interaction before. Colby nodded, keeping his eyes trained on her. As his gaze scanned the interior of the vehicle, he saw nothing out of the ordinary. No discarded food wrappers, no empty alcohol containers, no bags or equipment. Just a closed notebook on her lap and a phone turned face down on the center console. It didn't make sense. He had seen enough to know when something wasn't adding up. "Can I see your license and registration?" he asked, his tone neutral but probing. The woman didn't hesitate. Her movements were slow and deliberate, as if she was taking extra care to avoid making him feel threatened. It caught his attention, a small but significant gesture. She handed him the documents without a word, and Colby took the license with a raised eyebrow. Talia Monroe. Her license was out of state, registered to an address in Tempe, Arizona. "You live in Ohio now, or just passing through?" Colby asked. His curiosity piqued. "On assignment," she replied quickly, almost too quickly. "Temporary. I'm a researcher, security data analytics." She explained it like she had said it 1,000 times before. Too polished, too rehearsed. Colby wasn't convinced. Not yet. There was something about the way she spoke, the calmness in her demeanor, the way she gave information without hesitation. It didn't sit right. "And you live here? In this building?" he pressed. "No," she answered without missing a beat. "Then why here? Why this parking lot?" "I needed a quiet spot with a strong cell signal," she explained. "I like to think without distractions." Colby's instincts kicked in. It wasn't paranoia. It was a gut feeling that had served him well over the years. The explanation was too neat, too convenient. Something about it didn't add up. "I'm going to ask you to step out of the vehicle, Miss Monroe," Colby said firmly. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now, Something in his gut told him that it was time to take a step further. The woman didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. There was a pause, just enough to make Colby wonder what was running through her mind. Then, with a single blink, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out of the vehicle. She was dressed in black slacks and a fitted blazer. Business casual, but not quite casual enough to be sitting in a parking lot on a Tuesday night. No jewelry, her hair pulled back into a neat bun. She didn't look like someone idly waiting in a parking lot. She looked like someone trying hard not to be noticed. Colby gestured for her to stand near the front of the vehicle as he radioed for backup. It wasn't an aggressive move, just a precaution. He wasn't about to take chances. As he waited, his eyes didn't leave her. She wasn't pacing or fidgeting, wasn't looking around nervously. She was just standing there, waiting, like she was expecting everything to unfold exactly as it was. It wasn't long before his partner, Officer Brent Wallace, rolled up behind him. That's when the tension in the air thickened. As Colby approached her once more, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a look in her eyes, sharp, focused, calculating. It wasn't fear or anxiety. It was something else, something colder. Wallace, who was chewing gum as usual, glanced at the woman before turning his attention back to Colby. "What we got?" Colby handed him the Arizona license. "She says she's on assignment. Works in security data or something like that. Not local, no apartment here, just sitting in this lot." Wallace raised an eyebrow. "This late? In a blazer?" Colby didn't respond, but his attention was fixed on her eyes. They weren't nervous or defensive. They were calculating, watching every movement, every breath he took. "Ma'am," Wallace said, stepping closer, "mind telling me exactly what kind of government work you're doing and why you're doing it here instead of, I don't know, anywhere else?" The woman's voice didn't waver. "I don't mind, but I can't give you the specifics. What I can tell you is that my work involves observing behavior patterns tied to regional networks. Physical locations give us critical context." Wallace muttered something under his breath, clearly unconvinced. "Uh-huh. That's supposed to mean something to me?" She gave him a small shrug, almost apologetic. "I'm afraid I can't give more details." It was all too neat, too controlled, too perfect. And yet, Colby couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more lurking beneath the surface. The tension in the air escalated quickly. Wallace's skepticism turned into outright suspicion, and his irritation was clear as he whispered to Colby, his voice low but sharp. "She's either full of it or hiding something. Want to run her name through the system?" Colby didn't hesitate. "Already did," he replied, tapping away at his patrol tablet. "No flags, no prior records. License is clean." "Well, she's not acting like a regular civilian," Wallace muttered, still eyeing Talia. Colby shifted his focus back to her, his gut telling him that something wasn't right. "I'm going to need to check the inside of your vehicle," he said, his tone firm but not aggressive. Talia, without showing any hint of alarm, simply looked up at him. "On what grounds?" she asked, her voice still calm, almost unnervingly so. "You're parked here in a private lot, where you don't live, with no stated business, and it's after dark," Colby explained. "You say you're doing government work, but you haven't shown any proof of that. I've got enough to ask you to step back while we take a look inside." There was no argument from her. Instead, she sighed softly, as though the situation had long ceased to surprise her. It wasn't frustration or fear, it was simply resignation. "The back of the SUV is unlocked," she said quietly. "Everything else is locked." Wallace opened the back door. It was pristine, almost unnervingly so. 2 changes of clothes, a car charger, a bag of almonds, and a laptop bag with no visible tech inside. No trash, no receipts, nothing that would indicate the presence of a person who had been living out of their car. It all seemed too perfect, too tidy. Then, Colby noticed something. A rectangle of Velcro stuck to the side panel, a sign that something had been removed. "Did you have a tracker here?" he asked, his voice sharp. For the first time, Talia's eyes narrowed. It wasn't anger, but something far more ominous. Warning. "I think you should stop now," she said in a low, measured voice. Colby took a step back, sensing the shift in her demeanor. That tone wasn't fear. It was a subtle shift, something that didn't belong to a civilian. It was as though she was no longer just a woman in a parking lot. She was something else entirely. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to place your hands on the hood of the vehicle," Colby instructed. Talia hesitated for only a moment, staring at him for a full 3 seconds before turning and complying without protest. Wallace, putting on his gloves, moved toward her to conduct a quick pat-down. That's when it happened. Talia spoke again, softly, deliberately, but with unmistakable clarity. "Left inside pocket." Wallace froze, his hand hovering midair. "What? Left inside pocket," she repeated, the words cutting through the silence. Wallace hesitated for just a beat before reaching into her blazer pocket. What he pulled out was a leather badge wallet. He opened it slowly, his eyes widening as he saw the gold seal inside. "Department of Justice," he read aloud, his voice now laced with disbelief. "FBI. Oh, hell," Wallace breathed, his face draining of color. Colby stepped forward, his heart racing, and took the badge from Wallace. It was heavier than it looked. He pressed the seal with his fingers, feeling a strange warmth. "Special Agent Talia Monroe, Organized Crime Division," Colby muttered under his breath, almost as if trying to process what he was holding. Talia turned around slowly, locking eyes with him. There was no anger, no shout, just the cold weight of truth hanging in the air. "You just compromised a 6-month federal investigation," she said, her tone low and steady, but there was no yelling, no threats, just the simple, brutal truth. Officer Wallace took a step back, his eyes wide with shock. He stared at the badge, then at her, still holding it as though it might explode in his hands. "You're FBI?" Wallace asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Talia replied, her voice firm and controlled. "And I need that back." Colby handed her the badge without hesitation, but his eyes never left her. Organized crime. That's what she had just said. Special agent. She tucked the badge away and adjusted her blazer, the same calmness returning to her posture as if nothing had changed. "Yes, embedded assignment," she continued, almost as if the badge in her hand was nothing more than a formality. "Long-term surveillance." Wallace scoffed. "Surveilling what? In a parking lot in Toledo?" Talia didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her gaze cool as she weighed her words carefully. "I'm watching a known associate of an arms trafficker," she explained, her voice softening as she pointed to a beige building across the lot. "He launders money through real estate fronts. That building over there, Unit 3B, the guy who moved in 6 weeks ago. His name's not real. His identity is fake, but he's real, and he's dangerous." Colby blinked, his mind racing. This wasn't just some routine check. This was far beyond anything he had anticipated. "How dangerous are we talking?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Talia turned toward the complex, her voice lowering. "Enough that I've got a panic phrase built into my check-ins. Enough that if he saw you two search me tonight, he might already be trying to cover his tracks." Wallace ran his hand through his hair, clearly shaken. "This is insane. You should have told us. Flashed your badge the second we got here." "No," Talia interrupted, her voice firm, "because I didn't know if you were going to blow my cover or help protect it." The weight of those words hit Colby harder than he expected. She wasn't speaking to insult them. She was speaking a truth she had grown tired of repeating. "Agent Monroe," Colby said, his tone shifting, "we're not here to make your job harder, but this is a bad spot to be playing guessing games." "I wasn't playing," she replied, her voice steady but edged with frustration. "Until 2 minutes ago, I was invisible. Now I'm not. That changes everything." Colby turned to look back at the apartment complex. A single light was on in Unit 3B. The curtains were drawn, and there was no movement inside. But now, his mind was racing with new questions. Had they been seen? Do you think he saw us approach you? Colby asked, his voice low. Talia paused for a moment before answering, her eyes never leaving the building. Maybe. Maybe not. But I guarantee he's got motion cameras in the lot. My Tahoe was parked right in his sightline on purpose. I built trust. I made myself boring until now. Wallace kicked a stone near the curb, his frustration palpable. So, what happens now? Talia opened her passenger door and retrieved a slim black case. Inside, she pulled out a sat phone, a secure tablet, and a small pistol in a holster. Everything clean, everything registered. I need to contact my SACE, she said, her voice calm as she prepared herself for what was to come. That's my special agent in charge. He'll assess whether we need to move early or salvage what's left. And in that moment, Colby realized this wasn't just a routine check. This was only the beginning of something far bigger than they had ever expected. Colby nodded, but inside, a feeling was stirring, something that couldn't be shaken. A combination of guilt, frustration, or perhaps the creeping sense that they had just stumbled into something far beyond their usual duties. You should have had someone watching your six, Wallace muttered, almost under his breath, still processing everything. I did, Talia replied, her voice sharp, her eyes never leaving the parking lot. Until last week when they pulled my backup due to budget reshuffling. That's why I was alone tonight. There was a heavy, uncomfortable silence that followed. The weight of the situation hung between them like a thick fog. Colby exhaled slowly, trying to steady his mind. What do you need from us right now? For the first time, Talia looked at him like he might actually be useful. I need you to not panic, not go knocking on any doors, and definitely don't alert the guy in 3B that anything's changed. Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying urgency that couldn't be ignored. Colby nodded, processing her request. And what are you going to do? Talia tapped her tablet with purpose. I'm going to warn my SACE that we've got a problem, and if I'm right, we don't have much time before that problem moves. Wallace stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck in disbelief. I thought we were just checking on someone scrolling through TikTok. Colby didn't answer immediately. His gaze had shifted back to the apartment complex. The porch light in Unit 3B had gone out. Had it been on earlier? Agent Monroe, Colby said quietly, what happens if this guy runs? She looked up from her tablet, her expression hardening slightly. Then you'll get to see exactly what I was trying to stop. Before Colby could ask her to elaborate, her sat phone buzzed. Talia's eyes narrowed, her entire posture going rigid, like a wire had snapped inside her. She paused before tapping the phone and holding it to her ear. Yeah, this is Monroe. Go. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were sharp, focused. She stood still, not even blinking. Every breath was measured, controlled. Colby and Wallace exchanged silent glances, both waiting for the next move. Talia listened, her body unmoving, her gaze distant, as though the conversation was happening miles away. Who saw it? She asked, her tone shifting, lower now, more tense. Was it from the north cam or the west? There was a brief silence. Then she asked again, how long ago? Another pause. Understood. She ended the call, slid the sat phone back into her coat, and turned toward them. Her voice was clipped, and there was no room for argument. We've got a breach. They saw you two walk up. Facial recognition tagged your patrol car the second you pulled in. Colby's stomach dropped. They? You said it was one guy. It was, she replied, her jaw tightening. Until tonight. He's not alone. I've been suspecting for weeks that he was a courier. Turns out, he's also a coordinator. And tonight, he was expecting a drop. Wallace took a step forward, his disbelief evident. Wait, you're telling me we walked into an arms deal in a parking lot behind a damn leasing office? Talia didn't answer right away. Her gaze moved down the row of buildings, her jaw set. I was supposed to confirm the contact, record the handoff, get a photo ID, but now, she turned to look at both of them. It's likely scrubbed. They'll pull out before sunrise. Colby scratched his temple, trying to process what she was saying. So what? They're packing up weapons, drugs? Talia shook her head. Encrypted laptops, buyer lists, payment chains, and proof of supply lines going back to East Street. Lewis, we were this close to pulling down a whole regional ring, and now we're lucky if we can keep the tail end of it. Wallace sighed, his shoulders slumping. Damn. Talia stepped closer to Colby, her voice quieter now, almost urgent. You didn't screw this up on purpose. I get that, but I need you to understand something. Colby nodded, ready to listen. There are people in that unit right now who will disappear by morning, Talia said, her voice low, and the ones who replace them. She leaned in a little closer, her gaze intense. They won't be doing surveillance. They'll be tying up loose ends. Colby felt the blood drain from his face as he realized the weight of her words. He thought of the families living nearby, the kids, the teachers, the nurses, completely unaware of the danger lurking right under their noses. Wallace crossed his arms, his frustration and confusion growing. So, what do we do? Are you calling in a task force? Talia hesitated. Not yet. They'll scatter if we come in loud. Right now, we try to contain movement. I've got one surveillance van still on rotation. I'll call them in. Her eyes flicked to the sidewalk. A man was walking a dog across the parking lot. He looked completely ordinary, nothing suspicious about him, except for the fact that he gave Talia a quick, deliberate glance, not at the officers, at her. Talia's hand moved slightly toward her blazer, and Colby tensed. You know him? Talia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she whispered, Don't react. He wasn't here before. He just appeared. Wallace glanced over, but by the time he turned his head, the man and the dog had already disappeared behind the building. Talia pulled her sat phone out again, dialed quickly, and started walking toward the Tahoe, speaking in quick, sharp tones. Colby followed. Was that him? He asked. Could it be? Could be, Talia replied, her voice steady, but there was something darker in her eyes. Could also be someone signaling that they've already dumped the evidence. Either way, I'm not waiting for confirmation. She opened the SUV's door and pulled out a slim black case. Inside was a photo, grainy, black and white, but clear enough to recognize the man with the dog. The same profile. I knew that face, she said, pressing the photo into Colby's hands. That man is suspected of transporting encrypted drives from one city to another. Each one contains client data for illegal sales. Colby's grip on the photo tightened as the weight of the situation hit him like a freight train. What had started as a routine check had turned into a web of deceit, danger, and conspiracy that was far larger than they could have imagined. And now, there was no turning back. Wallace's eyes widened with realization. So, what happens if he leaves right now? He asked, his voice tight with tension. Talia's gaze was locked on the road ahead, but her voice was as calm as ever. If he leaves and we don't stop him, the entire operation resets. Everyone goes underground. People die. Before she could finish, the faint screech of tires cut through the quiet of the lot. Colby whipped his head around, his heart racing. The man and the dog had vanished. All that remained was a single set of taillights disappearing into the night. Colby was already in his cruiser, throwing the car into gear. Plate, he barked. Talia was already sprinting toward her Tahoe. No plate, she called out, her eyes scanning the darkened lot. That car's clean. Wallace stood frozen for a second, processing the situation, then snapped into action. He was on the radio in an instant. We need eyes at all eastbound exits. Black sedan, no tags, driver may be armed. Possible suspect fleeing scene tied to a federal investigation. Do not engage, just follow. He turned to Colby. This just got real. Talia's Tahoe peeled out of the lot, tires squealing. Colby hit the sirens and followed her, the night around them blurring into streaks of red lights, potholes, and startled drivers. Talia wasn't reckless. Her movements were calculated, precise. She ran the lights, but only when it was clear, only when she had made sure. Then the call came over the radio, cutting through the tension like a knife. Unit 4, be advised. Suspect vehicle last seen merging onto I-280 southbound. No visual beyond the on-ramp. Colby cursed under his breath. Talia didn't break her stride. She turned into a gas station, killing the engine with a smooth, practiced motion. Colby followed and got out of his car, walking toward her. "He's gone," he said, his words hanging in the air like a statement of fact. Talia didn't respond immediately. She stared at the quiet road, her fingers twitching like she wanted to hit something. Finally, she stepped out of the Tahoe and nodded grimly. "Gone, and I guarantee the unit's being cleared as we speak. Laptops, documents, flash drives, everything's probably in a landfill or a fire barrel by now." Colby leaned on the hood of his cruiser, a sigh escaping him. "We tried." "You didn't see him coming," Talia said, her voice sharp. "That's the thing. I did. I knew there was a hole in coverage. I flagged it last week. My backup was pulled before I could patch it." Wallace joined them, stepping up with a quiet, thoughtful expression. The air around them felt heavier now, thick with the weight of failure and unfinished business. "So, what now?" Wallace asked, breaking the silence. "You regroup?" Talia let out a breath, a sound that had clearly been weighing on her. "Now I file a failure report. I go back to Quantico, sit through a post-mortem, and listen to people who've never been in the field tell me what I should have done better." Colby frowned, his voice quiet. "That's it?" "No," she said, her gaze lifting to meet both of theirs. "Then I do it all over again. Different city, different alias, different risk." Wallace shook his head, disbelief settling on his features. "Why keep doing it?" Her expression shifted. Not sad, not angry, but resolute. "Because if we don't, the people who do this kind of trafficking win every time. They'll keep trading weapons, bodies, identities like none of it matters, like no one's watching." There was a long pause. Colby didn't know what to say. He had never seen a federal agent so close to burning out, but Talia wasn't unraveling. She was holding on tighter, determined as ever. Then she turned to Colby. "And you?" she asked. "You walked up because someone called me in. You didn't know what I was. You did your job." He started to speak, but she cut him off. "But next time, ask why someone looks out of place before you act like they don't belong. Not everyone sitting in a car after dark is doing something wrong. Some of us are doing something right." Her words hit him harder than anything she'd said all night. Colby nodded slowly, feeling the weight of it. "I hear you." Wallace scratched his head, trying to make sense of the night's events. "So, what do we say in the report?" Talia gave a thin smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Say the subject was gone before you could make contact. Say you checked on a parked vehicle and found nothing. Keep it clean." Colby raised an eyebrow. "You want us to lie?" "No," she said, her tone steady but firm. "I want you to keep the door open for the next time we try to take these people down, and believe me, there will be a next time." Talia got back into her Tahoe, the engine humming to life. She rolled down the window slightly, her words cutting through the night air. "You two didn't ruin this," she said, "but tonight was a reminder. Not everyone who looks like a threat is one, and not every threat wears a mask." Then she drove off, no sirens, no rush, just a slow, deliberate fade into the night. Colby stood there under the harsh gas station light, the weight of her words settling on him. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, but it felt like time had stopped. Something inside him had shifted, and he couldn't help but wonder what else he had missed over the years, who else he had judged too fast. He didn't go home that night. He parked 2 blocks from the complex and sat there, the engine off, the windows cracked just enough to hear the hum of the city. He wasn't on shift anymore, wasn't clocked in, but something wouldn't let him leave. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him when she said, "Next time, ask why." Maybe it was knowing they had interrupted something much bigger than either of them could fix. Or maybe it was guilt. The building was quiet now. No lights in Unit 3B, no dog walkers, no signs that anything was still happening there. The crime scene was digital, wiped clean before anyone even knew to call it one. Wallace had gone home after filing a report that said nothing. "We saw a woman in a vehicle. She was compliant, no violations, end of story." But Talia's name didn't appear once, and Colby couldn't shake it. His thoughts kept cycling, like a never-ending loop. What if he hadn't radioed for backup so quickly? What if he had asked better questions? What if? Just then, a car pulled into the lot. Not Talia's Tahoe, not the black sedan either. It was an older white hatchback, its bumper dented and worn. The car rolled into the spot next to where the Tahoe had been, headlights off. The driver, a tall figure, hoodie pulled up, cargo pants, stepped out, glancing around like he wasn't quite sure he was in the right place. He opened the passenger door, pulled out a duffel bag, and, without a second glance, started walking around the side toward the dumpster. Colby sat up straight, eyes narrowing. The man didn't go into the building. He was heading to the dumpster, but not in it. He tossed the bag behind it, almost carelessly, and jogged back to his car, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Colby didn't wait. He got out of his cruiser and moved quickly, staying hidden in the shadows of a nearby tree. He shed his uniform jacket, blending into the night in a simple hoodie. Civilian watch mode. The bag was heavy. Colby moved fast, but cautiously, to the dumpster where the man had just been. He waited a full 30 seconds to make sure the area was clear. When he reached the bag, he unzipped it just enough to peek inside. 3 laptops, no stickers, no logos, just bare, clean surfaces. And tucked into a side pocket, 4 USB drives taped together. His heart raced as he zipped it shut again. He could call it in. He should call it in. But what if that flagged everything again? What if Talia's operation was still salvageable? What if calling it in now erased what little ground they'd made? Without thinking, he dialed the one number he wasn't supposed to still have. She picked up after the second ring. "You're not supposed to contact me." Her voice was sharp, but not surprised. Yeah, Colby muttered, "but I think you missed something." There was silence on the other end for a moment. "Go on." Colby described the white hatchback, the man, the bag, everything. She was silent as he spoke. "Still at the scene?" she asked when he finished. "Yeah. Stay put. Don't touch anything else. I'll have someone there in 12 minutes. 12 minutes later, a gray van pulled into the lot, unmarked. No lights, no uniforms, just 2 figures in black windbreakers who moved with the ease of professionals who'd done this more times than they cared to count. They didn't ask Colby any questions. They didn't speak to him at all. They simply took the bag, nodded once, and left. No paperwork, no signature, no thanks. Colby didn't expect a thank you, but he did expect her. And sure enough, 5 minutes after the van disappeared into the night, Talia's Tahoe pulled up again. She stepped out, her eyes scanning the empty parking space, disappointment flashing across her face. She looked at Colby. "You were still watching," she said, not as a question but as an observation. "I couldn't leave," Colby admitted. Talia nodded. "That was a dump point," she explained. "They used it for bad runs. If the drop went sideways, someone would circle back hours later and dispose of the hardware. So those laptops, they were evidence. They are evidence. And you just saved more than you know." Colby looked at her for a long second, processing what she was saying. "You're going to make it stick this time?" Talia didn't smile, but something softened in her expression. "We might, but..." Her phone lit up again, and her expression hardened immediately. Whatever was happening now was bigger than what they had just dealt with. She stared at the screen for a moment, her jaw clenched. Then, almost reluctantly, she answered the call. "This is Monroe." Colby couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but he didn't need to. The tension in her posture said everything. Her face went cold, her eyes narrowing. Her shoulders stiffened, like armor snapping into place. "Understood," she said shortly, then hung up. "What happened?" Colby asked, his concern rising. Talia turned toward him, her face grim. The drop was only part of it. He wasn't just a courier, he was the signal. That bag behind the dumpster, that was a message to the next player. Colby's stomach twisted. A message to run? To reset and warn anyone connected? Talia nodded, her eyes hard. "Yeah, law enforcement got too close. They're already covering their tracks." Frustration built in Colby's chest. "So, it's not over." "No," Talia replied, her voice tight. "It's just harder now." She took a few steps away from him, hands buried in her pockets. Then she turned back and looked at him again, her tone softer this time, but with an urgency that made him take a deep breath. "You know what messes us up the most in this job?" she asked. Colby tilted his head, unsure of where she was going. "It's not the evil people," she said, her voice steady. "It's the ones who look normal. It's the fact that danger doesn't dress like danger anymore. Sometimes it's a guy with a golden retriever. Sometimes it's a woman with a clipboard. Sometimes it's a clean-cut guy calling in a suspicious person because someone doesn't fit the neighborhood." She paused, taking a slow breath, eyes lost in thought. "I've worn a fake life for 6 months, been followed, targeted. I've lost sleep, lost colleagues, and in all that time, not once was I stopped by the people I'm actually investigating." Colby swallowed, realizing what she was saying. "You know who stopped me?" she asked, turning to look at him, her gaze piercing. "Us," Colby said quietly. She nodded. "I get it. You didn't know. You were responding to a call. You followed protocol, but you assumed I didn't belong. That's what started this." Colby nodded slowly, guilt creeping in. "Yeah, I did." They stood in silence for a moment. Two people who had both been right in their own way, but wrong in another. Talia stepped closer, her voice low but insistent. "I'm not asking you to feel guilty. I'm asking you to remember this the next time you see someone who doesn't fit the scene. Ask yourself if it's because they're a threat, or just because you can't explain them." Colby didn't look away. "I will." She gave a slight nod, her expression softening for a moment, then turned back toward her SUV. The wind picked up, blowing a fast food wrapper across the parking lot, tumbling aimlessly in the breeze. A regular night in a regular city, but Colby knew better now. He watched her drive away, no flashing lights, no sirens, just another ghost slipping back into the system. As he stood there alone, the truth weighed heavy on his shoulders. They hadn't just blown a federal operation, they had blown a chance to see someone clearly before they judged her. And in that misstep, damage had been done. Some of it fixable, some of it not. But the lesson was clear. You don't have to see a badge to respect someone's presence. You don't have to know someone's job to give them space. And just because someone doesn't look right to you doesn't mean they're doing wrong. Maybe if more of us paused long enough to ask better questions, we wouldn't need to learn these lessons the hard way. If this story made you think, good, because that's the point. We all have blind spots, but we can choose what we do with them. So next time you feel the urge to judge someone too fast, pause, ask, think, and maybe the world becomes just a little less broken. If this story hit home, share it.